So what happens when you sell a 1031 exchange property? We're gonna go over that right here, right now. You're gonna learn about actual exchanges and the certain processes that are gonna happen in each step. I'm also gonna talk about examples of 1031 exchanges that may apply to you. And lastly, I'm gonna show you some resources that you can go to learn more about 1031 exchanges. And finally, and most importantly, I'm gonna talk to you about being careful in your 1031 exchange and who you pick as an intermediary. So when you do a 1031 exchange, you're trying to get as much capital or cash as you can out of your property when you sell and use that cash to buy the next property. The challenge is that if you don't do a 1031 exchange and you get the cash, you have to pay capital gains tax on that cash when you receive it. By not taking the cash and doing a 1031 exchange, you are avoiding having to pay taxes right then and there when you sell the property, and you're able to use the extra cash to get a bigger property. And we'll talk about some of the reasons you may want to do that. But first, let me show you what actually happens when you do a 1031 exchange. Like any other real estate transaction, you're going to end up selling your property, but in your contract, you're going to put that the buyer agrees to cooperate with the seller in a 1031 tax-deferred exchange at no cost or delay to buyer, okay? That's typically what we put in the contract. There needs to be some language in your agreement that you're cooperating in an exchange. So I sell this house that I bought for, let's say, I purchase price, PP means purchase price for $250,000. Let's say I had it for like 4 or 5 years, and today it's worth $400,000, I sell it for $400,000. I'm gonna leave out the cost of sale, real estate fees, and those other things for the simplicity of explanation. But in this particular case, my gain from $250 to $400 is how much? It's $150,000, right? So I had a $150,000 gain, $150,000 gain, but I also have another gain, and that gain is depreciation. Depreciation, let's say, for example, is $50,000. So I'm going to add another $50,000 in depreciation. Okay, so my gain is $200,000 on this sale. Why $200,000? I bought it for $250,000, I sold it for $400,000, so $400 minus $250 is $150,000, and I've got the depreciation. These are paper losses that I took, which I talked about in other videos, where I depreciate the value of the property as it decreases in value over time because it's getting older. That $50,000 now has to be included in my exchange. I have a tax basis, right? A tax basis, and I have what I paid for it and what I sell it for, and then I have what my basis is for taxes. Now that sometimes confuses people, but all that means is that what the value of the property is for my taxes is decreasing, and I'm taking tax breaks for that or tax expenses for that legally, and I have to recapture that when I sell it. I have to include that when I sell it. That just doesn't go away. So as I sell the property, now I buy a $600,000 property. So maybe I've got 4 units here. So I sell this property like I always sell something. That's my down leg, and this is my up leg, right? So the up leg is a property of mine. Now here's what happens. Normally when you sell a property, you get a check or a wire from escrow and it goes right into your bank account. In this case, that doesn't happen. The cash from the sale goes into an intermediary. An intermediary, okay? A person in the middle. So here's the cash from the sale. Okay, it doesn't go to you. Does not go to you, okay? It goes to a third party called a qualified intermediary, which is a licensed person who takes that cash and then uses that cash as your down payment to buy your next property. All right? You buy your next property just like any property. You go to the bank, you get a loan, but you use the proceeds from the sale, in this case, whatever it is, depends on how much debt you have on the property, right? You take your proceeds from the sale and you use those proceeds to buy the next property. Now, why would you do that? You do that because it allows you to have more cash to buy the next property, right? There's two things going on here. One is, what did you pay for the property? and what'd you sell it for? That's one calculation, right? I paid $250 and I sold it for $400, so I made $150. But I also have to recapture my depreciation. So for tax basis, right? My tax basis is not $250, it's actually $200 now. You see how it went down because of the depreciation. So now that $200 is what I would normally pay taxes on, the difference between the $200 and the $400. I would pay taxes on $200,000, even though you think, well, I paid $250 and I sold it for $400, right? So I made $150. You made $150 plus the $50 you have to recapture depreciation. And that's an important calculation to remember. And this is why you want to subscribe, because these are the details of that you need to know when you're doing 1031 exchanges or you're investing in real estate. All these little things are what help you to get the extra dollars and be successful, okay? So once you sell your property, again, like we talked about, you have 45 days to ID 3 properties that you're gonna buy. 45 days to ID 3 properties. And how long do you have to close it? You have 180 days. Not 181, not 185, not close enough. You have exactly 180 days from the day that you close this deal, okay? Make sure you use a qualified intermediary and make sure that you, for sure, get the rules and follow the rules so you don't end up thinking you did an exchange and you did it wrong and then you end up owing taxes with the cash you've already put into the other property. So recently I did a 1031 tax deferred exchange and I'm actually in the middle of it right now. And something came up just this morning which put me at risk. And I only identified one property during the 45-day period, thinking there was going to be no issues. By identifying the one property, I didn't have the other 2 properties. I sold a 4-plex in California for about $875,000, and I was buying an apartment building, 15 units, for about $2.3 million. The lender just this morning did an environmental report which said that the sellers had filed a licensing and permit for hazardous waste on the property. Well, this hazardous waste to the lender is like, what is this? So we have to do what's called a phase 1, which is to look at the ground and make sure everything's fine. It's all residential. I don't think there's going to be an issue. But had there been an issue, which I don't think there's going to be, but had there been an issue, I may not be able to complete my exchange now because I only identified one property because I was so certain that this was going to close, right? This is why you want to identify 3 properties. Always go shopping and at least identify those addresses and have them with your intermediary. You give that information to your intermediary of what you're going to buy. So don't just pick one, pick 3 and close one. So that's important. So we're going to talk about in the next video, how many properties can you identify in a 1031 exchange and why you want to do that. I'll see you there.